BMW E89 Z4 35i and 35IS are fitted with the N54 engine all the way from 2009 to 2016. This is the same engine that's fitted to the 135 and 335 through the late 2000s. But on those cars, they received a low pressure fuel sensor. So this stainless steel feed line here with this little attachment on it normally has on the 135 and the 335, here's one here, a fuel sensor screwed into it, but on the Z4 it doesn't even, it's not even drilled and tapped for it, but the rest of the feed line is the same. But there's also some wiring differences, or I've pulled apart the junction box here and pulled apart the connectors in the DME and found that none of the wiring is present in my 2009 car. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have changed it even later. So I plan to retrofit the 135 or 335 sensor onto my car, as well as the wiring, and it will also require some changes to the ROM or firmware that runs on the car's computer. So there's some physical work involved, some electrical work, as well as then some computer programming work. And I'm going to attempt to make it that I can at least read the low pressure fuel sensor, or read the low pressure fuel line, and monitor it for the sake of engine safety. I started by buying a loom, an engine loom from a 335, as well as the low pressure fuel sensor and feed line assembly. And the first step I've done here is to track the wiring. So I'll put a little marking on each of the pins here. So there's 3 wires, give them all a little code, 1 blue dot, 2 blue dots, or 3 blue dots. And then using a multimeter just to check continuity like that, touching the wires there and tracking through where they come out here. And I've found the wires, I've marked them, I've actually pulled them out of this DME plug. So this is the 44 pin plug that goes into a DME. It's the same 44 pin plug on the 135, 335 and Z4, all with that N54 engine. There's also this smaller plug and this smaller plug as well, but these wires, all 3 of them come through to here, and I've labelled on there where they go. So the pin here, that the wire here that has the, for example, the 2 blue dots in the middle there, comes into, I think it's pin 34 on this side, on this connector, and the one with 1 blue dot and 3 blue dots come in on that side. I think it's pin 7 and 8 on that 44 pin connector. So I noted it down. Yeah, they are there, the red and black wire, pin 7, the blue wire. Now the blue wire actually starts out down here as a, so the camera can pick it up, as a blue and white wire. It changes very quickly at this connector into the junction box to a straight blue wire. So there's a blue wire, a yellow and red wire, and a red and black wire. There are other wires with those same colours, so you need to make sure you get the right ones, but then they go straight through. I've used a multimeter to also check continuity to every other pin on the plug to make sure that there's no Y junctions or T junctions in this loom. These wires are single strand that go all the way through. They don't branch off to somewhere else. So I now plan to retrofit this to my car. I found that the DME must be mounted a lot closer on a 335 right-hand drive car than it is to a Z4 right-hand drive car. The length of this section here is about 30 centimeters longer on the Z4, and so I'm going to actually need to extend these wires. So cut them and put a section in. I've checked the wiring diagram, the factory wiring diagram. These are a 0.5 millimeter squared, or I think that works out to be a 22 AWG, or American wire gauge wire. And from what I've found, I've got some 24 gauge, which is slightly smaller, but I'm sure it'll be all right. Some silicon wires there I had from past projects. Silicon, I probably slightly prefer it for this application because it is more heat resistant, and is going to be inside of the loom there. It should be fine. So yeah, I've got some different colours here to choose from. I want to run a whole strand all the way through on the Z4 through that section, which is, as I said, about 30 centimetres or 1 foot longer. I tried on here just as a test to try and thread wire through. There's no way it's going through. I found that in the past that line trimmer or whippersnipper line is normally a good option to use, and I tried for about 20 minutes on that 335 loom and couldn't get it through. It kept jamming. Anyway, I didn't need to actually do that one, so I thought I might as well come and try it out on here. And without even disconnecting the DME and straightening out this line, I managed to feed this, I think it's about 3mm whippersnipper line, managed to feed it all the way through and out the junction box here. So I can now connect on the wires I need to extend through here and pull them back through towards the DME, and then I will have a joiner up here, short section of wire into the correct pin placements on here. As I said, these pins are missing from the wires and pins are missing from the Z4 DME, so I've labelled them. There's the 2 blue dots and the 1 and the 3, so those positions are vacant. So I'll use the original 335 wires, a short section, join it, run the new silicon wire down through there, and then join it again inside of that junction box before running out to the sensor. Be aware that from the junction box there are 2 connectors that are identical that both can plug into this sensor. The one with the dots on it there is the correct one. It comes out of this junction box on the opposite side to where the main loom comes in, and that's the correct one for the sensor. This other one comes out of the other side, just underneath this where this main loom enters this junction box, and this one goes actually to the crankshaft angle sensor near the starter motor. It's going to be hard to do one-handed while filming, but to remove these pins from these connectors, you can either use a very small flat blade screwdriver, or you can just get a paper clip and hammer the end of it a couple of times lightly to sort of make it so it's sort of flat end on it. I'll try and sort of zoom in, you might be able to sort of see there. And then you're just pushing down on this little clip here through the hole as you pull on the wire, and it will easily come out. That's the section of loom that I need. Pulled the wires through, this one first, and it's damaged the little the little locking tab on it is bent up there. So the other ones I put some tape over them, and that made it a lot easier to pull them through. They're not damaged. So I need to find another yellow and red wire, preferably. Turns out there is another one here in the loom, a yellow and red wire into the same connector, and so I will pull that through to be able to use that section to go to my DME. So I've cut the original wire here, leaving a short tail on to that end, which is going to go to the sensor, and I've soldered on about a 1 metre section, which will be more than enough of this silicon wire, and use some heat shrink, double layer of heat shrink, just to seal it off. Okay, so this end's all sort of ready to come back together. So this is the loom, this is the original wiring from the 335 loom, goes to silicon wire there. I've cable tied where the heat shrink is, that's where my solder joints are, and I've cable tied that through one of the slots in this junction box, so that can all go back together now. At the other end, so the cable, the silicon wire pulled it through with the loom here and came through to here, and it converts back from the silicon wire to the original 335 wiring here with the pins on it at this point, and I've also taped that up just to stop it from vibrating, and plugged in the connectors to their relevant ports on the loom. Now I can put all the DME wiring back together and the lid on the junction box. So these plugs here. This is the 44 pin plug for the DME. It sits in this carrier assembly, so I'm putting it back in, and they just slide in like that, and it clips in. To remove them, this is really hard with one hand, but to remove them, flat blade screwdriver in under that little clip there, just up there, push that in, and then you can slide this plug out. So it comes out. That one's now ready to go back on to the DME. To go back on, I've had to lift the DME assembly up so it clears this edge with the edge of the loom. So let's just go back on, pull that up. You get it started, and then this slides in, and as this slides in, it pulls down on the connector. So when you're taking it apart, it's the opposite. You start by grabbing hold of this and sliding it out, and that lifts the plug up, and then the last bit you just pull it off. Here it is. So that's why I've got to lift it up to clear, so the DME is unclipped from the back, and now slide that in, and that pushes down. Oops, now push the DME back in its hole, and that's all now locked back in. I think I've taken one wire out, this red one, no, this one here, so I'll connect that back up, and that will complete the work in here. I can have a little cover on here and put the cover back on, and that part is done. And the DME lid, at least on the right hand drive, these screws are all sort of captive, so they just sort of flop around in there, a little bit like the valve cover screws if you've ever done a valve cover. And so they don't actually come all the way out, or they don't need to come all the way out. Now I'll put this cover back on. So this one here is out of my car, the Z4. It's got the blank little adapter there. This is the 335 one. They're identical apart from the sensor in there. There's a little E12 aluminium bolt that goes through the P-clip there that holds it in place at that end, a 17mm nut at that end onto the high pressure fuel pump. And if you've got the original line connected to it, it's a rubber hose. It's got a little white clip in it that you pull back, and then you can remove the line from this. I think it's a 5/16 EFI fitting. I've got an aftermarket AN6 line. It's a very stiff line, and it's got this right angle on the other end, a right angle connector. That I need to keep it in exactly that position, so I've taken this whole assembly out so that I can mark the position on the pipe and get this one transferred to here in exactly the same position, because I can't tighten this up once it's in the car. As I said, if you've got the original hose, it'll just be a rubber line with a little white clip on the end that you squeeze in to remove it from this end, and you can leave that rubber hose in the car. I've got the hose off, and actually see there is a slight difference in the feed lines. Obviously the one without the sensors at the back here, Z4 one, this is the 335 one. I've aligned this end, everything's sort of parallel. You see the 335 one with the sensor is just slightly longer, about 5 or 10 millimeters longer, but I don't think that will cause any problems. The rest of the bends all look like they're in the same position. And the 335 line with the fuel sensor is now fitted. It fitted fine, the extra length didn't cause any harm. It's all connected up fine in behind there. I've put that line back on. You've got to make sure it goes straight into the high pressure fuel pump, and locate that little E12 aluminium bolt there with a blue top on it. Get that located at the same time so that it helps keep it in alignment, and everything's tightened up now. Everything else is connected back up except the dual cone intakes or the air cleaner box, depending on what you've got. But the throttle body is back on, the charge pipe's back on, all the sensors and everything else are all plugged back in, and I've run the car. It started fine, it's running fine. I've checked for leaks, there's no fuel leaks anywhere, and so the next step will be to put the air cleaner back on. As far as the sensor goes, it's fitted, it's plugged into the computer, but the computer now needs to be told that there is a sensor there. So the computer, or otherwise known as the DME in the BMW, will need a switch changed in the software to tell it that there is a sensor there and to take the reading from it. It still won't use it for making changes to the PWM signal to the low pressure fuel pump, but at least I'll be able to read the low pressure sensor there once I get that changed. I'll probably look at getting a third party to do that. I have investigated it, but my skills are not that good in reprogramming computers or writing code for DMEs. And I used a custom tuning company called Wedge Performance to enable the low pressure fuel sensor monitoring as part of a wider tuning package that they were doing for me. And they altered the bin file or the ROM of the DME to enable this low pressure fuel sensor monitoring. So it's maybe half of what the 335 has. The part that's maybe different or missing is that it's not using the closed loop control system of the 335. It is still using a lookup table type arrangement, I believe, for the Z4 to control the low pressure fuel pump. So but at least I can monitor it, and I'm monitoring it here with MHD through an OBD2 port reader. If you've got Kali or Pro Tools or something else, I believe you should also be able to see or monitor this low pressure fuel sensor data as well. And you should be aware that there are two types of low pressure fuel sensors on the 135 and or 335. I'm not sure when they changed, but these are the two sensors that are available. And the sensors are unique to the feed lines that they plug into. So if you buy them together, the feed line with the sensor, you shouldn't have any trouble. But if you're buying them separately, make sure that you're buying the feed line that matches the sensor or vice versa. This is one of those combinations. I couldn't find the other one quickly enough, but here is one of them, an assembly sold by FCP Euro, including the BMW part numbers there. Here are a few photos of the connectors I took during the process that you can look at and pause if needed to identify connection points. And here is the first of two wiring diagrams that I came across. Pause it if you need to, just showing all the different connectors if you like looking at them in German in a technical format. And here is the second wiring diagram I came across. It was identical, just showing a different colour wire there for one of the wires, blue instead of blue and yellow, but also the rest is the same. Good luck.